All righty, let's get this going. 3, 2, 1, go.
Ready, set, go.
Hello, hello. Welcome to Do It Live Autonomy podcast, where we discuss the last week's events here in Autonomy and maybe give you a little incentive to join in the future. Your host today is me, Ryan, deep in the DPRC, as I'm liking to call it these days. Last week was a pretty interesting week. We had Grand Theft World, of course, back on last Sunday. I don't really personally think that's a huge thing to touch on these days. Let's just turn my Discord off so I don't beeps like that anymore. That'd be very annoying. Quit. There we go. Last week was a pretty interesting week, though, in Grand Theft World, namely because Richard Grove interviewed a guy named James Evan Pilato. And in the spirit of Do It Live, he also did it live with having pretty much no plan in interviewing him, just sort of asked him like, hey, how did you get into this whole radio business thing? I definitely, is somebody on? No, excellent. Definitely recommend you guys go and check that out. Grand Theft World is certainly an always recommended daily, or even, or maybe not daily, hour a day watch. Certainly you can probably get through it in a week unless they do one of those 8-hour rare Tony Myers epics where you can't do it an hour a day. You'd have to do a day extra. But, you know, I digress. Autonomy is all about making people as autonomous or helping people learn how to be as autonomous as humanly possible, learning their way forward, as we like to say it. And as part of that, there's 2 Q&As that we do, or not we, but, you know, are hosted in here to help people, you know, if they have any issues during the lectures. And the one on last Sunday, it was interesting. To be perfectly honest, I kind of feel like I want to forget it just because of my role in that. But you know, that's also part of learning your way forward. Is sometimes everyone makes mistakes, and that, in my opinion, was one of mine. So the good thing, though, is the way I learned my way forward through some of the comments I had, which I'm not going to show you because I purposely didn't want to round up any clips of it. So I want this to be more of a discussion format. Was that I feel like I got most of the stuff, most of my frustrations with society out of my system, and now I just sort of want to flow along with it and just not really have any of that intensity. But the main thing that I wanted to get to for this stuff, as I sort of ramble my way along, as I tend to do, is autonomy is largely a place full of, well, not just entrepreneurial minds, not just people with an entrepreneurial mindset, but people who are actually like doing their own projects, have their own things in mind, their own things they want to bring to the world, not just in terms of business, but in terms more of philosophy and principle and whatnot. And so, sorry, was that? Anyway, if there's somebody who is unmuted, it'd be helpful if they mute themselves because I'm getting a little bits of stuff coming through myself. In any case, Monday night, we had the return of the Spiritual Revolution Meetup, moving from its previous time of Tuesdays over to Mondays, because there's nothing really happening on Mondays, and there was a lot of conflicts on Tuesdays. So it's a place where all of us, well, not all of us, but some of us go to discuss things that are more of a spiritual nature. We had some people, you know, doing some practice of tarot readings and whatnot, trying to hone their intuition a bit better and maybe even get a little bit better at public speaking, because of course that's a component of doing things like that. And I personally think it, you know, turned out a lot better than it has some of the other times, because, well, more people showed up, and that seemed to be an indicator of, hey, there's less time conflicts, there's less things going on, you know, people are actually able to show up. This is in fact a better time to be hosting this. And as the, you know, unofficial or official co-host, as depending on how you want to look at it. Yeah, I'd say it was a pretty good time. Certainly recommend doing that if you guys ever want to. It's Mondays at, I believe it is 8:30 Eastern time is the time that we have set for it. Unless that has also changed in the meantime, but that's the time I've got so far. Tuesday was a pretty big day though, because we have Ron Renauld. Hope I'm saying that last name right. And he did round 2 of his uncompromised accountability class. He doesn't want to call them sessions anymore or anything of that. They're rounds, or round 2. Technically, this is the 3rd class, except that the first one was just an intro. I think it's 3rd class, but the first was just an intro, so it doesn't really count. I guess that would have been round 0, if anything, unless I am for some reason miscounting and we have in fact only done 2. In any case, that whole class had a focus on rhythms, flowing with rhythms in nature, not so much trying to control everything, but sort of, I'd say going with the flow, but it wasn't quite that. In any case, it had a lot of good stuff with it. It had a lot of good, what was it called? Focus on like making sure you're doing things that are true, making sure you're sticking to your own principles and all these sorts of things. I definitely would recommend, if you are someone who is in a mindset or whatever, you really want to push yourself forward in terms of your accountability and getting things done. Definitely, that is a class that you should probably look into. And it's also one of the benefits of joining Autonomy is you get to be a part of beta classes like that, classes before they're really fully launched out into the market. You get to be a beta tester. So you get to see that sneak peek, you get to give some of that feedback, you get to, well, in a sense, get it for free. You won't really for free. It's more like get it for, as far as I understand, certainly as far as it's worked so far, get it as part of the cost of joining Autonomy in the first place. But yeah, one of the biggest impacts you're ever going to have on your life in terms of getting things done is if you can dig down into, your depths, into your guts, and get yourself a lot more accountability so that you can just get more stuff done in general. Because it's one thing to learn any specific skill, programming be a specific skill, carpentry, whatever. That's great. You can get better at that. But it really doesn't matter if you have those specific skills and you have all the business mindset and all the math and everything, that what you need to do to get it done and to achieve what you want. If you don't actually have the internal fortitude to actually do it, to actually carry it through, and to be anti-fragile, as the term goes, to deal with any of the hardships along the way. And that's essentially what Ron Renault's course deals with and helps you learn. And he even has handy little worksheets, or at least handy. Well, he doesn't have a handy worksheet, actually. Ironically, now I think about it, I haven't even looked at it. I should probably do that. But he has handy like homework after each class in slide form of like, hey, come, go and journal about, how you approach people over the next week, and figure out sort of why you talk to them the way you do, or what your agendas are, and just little things like that. And it's pretty helpful if you do it. And doing it is, of course, the name of the game. If you don't do it, it really doesn't matter how good the information is. On Wednesday, I know there's probably other things happening, but I'm just trying to think if there's anything else on Tuesdays. I can't remember right now. And that is okay, because you know what? That's just some of the mystery of if you getting to join Autonomy and then finding out, all these things that maybe I or others miss. There might be other things happening on Tuesday that you'll never know about until you join. So, there you go. Join up. In any case, on Wednesday, Michael Nimitz hosts a thing called Leadership, Ethics, and Organization. And sometimes, actually rather often these days, he has some interesting guests on. Ron Renauld was actually a guest on one of them. That was what happened sort of as the precursor to him sort of not setting up, but at least launching this beta course. And I don't know if Michael is in here right now. I should see if he is. And if he is not, that would be very unfortunate.
I'm here.
You're here? So Michael, do you want to say anything about about your Leo program. Namely, did you have a guest this week?
Yeah, actually, one of our fellow autonomy students / graduates, Justin Kurtz, talked about his ambitions to start a podcast. And he kind of outlined an idea that I think is really a unique and really clever approach to podcasting. He's got a kind of a campfire kind of setting where he's got two of his other friends. So it's a group of three discussing, kind of contemporary issues. But then it's kind of got a science fiction step. And, in regard to how he's going about doing it, I think it's appealing to kind of people's number one, ability to think, but then also people's ability to imagine and kind of suspend disbelief and talk about issues in a way in which it's not necessarily a safe space, but a space that people can bounce off each other a little, play with each other a little, and talk about subjects in a much more lighthearted and open kind of atmosphere. And so I thought it was a great interview. And I will say that talking about Ron's course the other night, one of the things that I thought was really interesting was that he brought up was this idea of the roles that you play and being able to identify what the roles are, and then what is excellent. Like what is the bar for excellent in those particular roles, whether you're a father or a brother or a son or a daughter. What does that mean? Like, and how do you apply that to your daily life? He gave us some exercises, and that was certainly one that for me, that next day, Wednesday, I was making a list, and I think it's a really important thing that I think a lot of people don't really think about, but it's one of those areas that, just like with autonomy, there's a lot of things that we cover that people don't necessarily think about. They kind of realize that it's important, but then they just never really get around to what exactly is that? Why is that important? And so that was a great example of that. But that's certainly one of the things that I'm doing with leadership, ethics, and organization. I'm trying to highlight some of our fellow students and fellow graduates and the opportunities that they're exploring, and giving them kind of that launch point where they can say, hey, this is an idea, this is a project that I'm working on, and who else might be willing to help me?
Sounds good. It sounds like both you and Ron definitely have. Well, you both have played off of each other, because he's mentioned that a few times too, and you've both inspired each other. I don't know if you were the one who brought him into autonomy, or at least advertised it to him, but yeah, nope. Okay. But yeah, no, that's good to hear. It's also always good to hear about people trying new things with podcasting. As much as there's always, like, there's a bajillion podcasts out there, covering every sort of subject imaginable. And at this point, it's sort of like, if you can do something new with it, that'd be great, because just with the sheer amount of them, it can sort of seem almost like everything's been done. But there's in every industry, everywhere you go, there's always some niche that hasn't been filled. And that niche is usually like in between two other ones, or some blind spot that, popular things miss because they're not the popular thing and all that. So, I mean, there's always a way to drill in and find success in whatever it is you're doing, so long as you enjoy doing it. I personally think that is probably the most important thing. Anyone can make a good story.
I was just going to say, like with Justin, and essentially kind of one of the elements of autonomy is kind of getting to know and meet your fellow classmates. We had a interview, and he discussed something that has been on his mind for a couple of years, and kind of in that spirit of do it live. I just said, hey, let's take it to the next level. Let's get it out in front of people why don't you come on my show? We'll talk about this idea. You've been working on it for a couple of years. It's a dream that you've had. Let's get in gear on it, you know? And I think that's another little piece of autonomy that I think is really exciting and important, is like encouraging people to have those dreams come true, you know, facilitating those dreams through helping each other.
Absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, as much as some people, you know, some of us in particular, would love to be, you know, completely independent of all that stuff, it doesn't really change the fact that working together is often, you know, just more efficient. As the old saying goes, teamwork makes the dream work. And so with that, I think we should move on to Thursday. Thursday, I guess, it had an event, but it didn't have an event for students. It had a graduate event on, what was it? It was a form of communication. It was like a conflict resolution thing, as I recall. I only saw a bit of it. But I'm going to bring that up because because basically there's not just perks for, you know, coming in, you're a student and then you're done, you know, to graduate. No, there's things that happen after you graduate. There's a whole bunch of stuff that opens up to you in terms of courses in the University of Reason. There's, you know, graduate only beta courses like the one that happened on Thursday. There's just a whole bunch of stuff that you get because it's a lifetime membership. And so you get access to, you know, the network of people who are autonomous people, or at least trying to be, who kind of just grow and grow and grow and grow as time goes on. So I figure that's always a good thing to mention. I didn't quite catch too much of that conflict resolution talk on Thursday. I caught some of it, but I cannot for the life of me remember what it was called. I remember the guy's name is Darren, if I remember correctly, who's hosting it.
Daryl Becker.
There we go, Daryl. Okay, yeah. Clearly I have no memory anymore. But that's okay, because you don't really need a memory. You know, it's not really that important. You just kind of need to do stuff, I guess. I don't know. I'm just rambling. That's what I do. If there's anything that I can do, it's that. Friday, of course, we had the lecture. Friday lectures are always on Fridays. I don't know if there's any point in or any place in the world where the time zone shifts enough that lectures are actually on a Saturday or a Thursday or something, but who knows? I mean, that would take math, and I'm not about to do that for this. But, you know, lectures are on Fridays. They usually last a few hours. They tend to have probably the best information that I've ever seen in terms of anything to do with entrepreneurship and beyond, because of course being autonomous is far more than just being an entrepreneur, but of course one is related to the other. And this week's lecture was all about sales, which is probably my worst skill, the thing that I actually don't like the most, and probably have no ability to really do at the moment. However, the way autonomy teaches skills is radically different than any other sort of skills training you've probably ever seen. Namely, because you're not really trying to sell anything. You're basically just trying to ask people questions and be like, hey, you have a problem. Maybe we could solve that problem. And it's a very, I guess, low-key, very casual way of doing sales. And I highly recommend trying to learn it because it seems to be incredibly effective. And I am tempted, as part of that, to play a clip, not from Autonomy, but from a totally different source that I felt was like a weird sci-fi representation of some of what not to do in sales and sort of like the reason not to do it. But I'm iffy about whether I should. It's like a 12-minute clip. But you know what? I'm going to leave it for now. I'm just not going to do it because I think it'd be way too off topic. So, but maybe we can bring it up later if people are interested. I could probably drop it in chat or something. In any case, one of the things I wouldn't mind opening the floor to for people is discussion on the concept of sales. I wouldn't mind hearing people's opinions, thoughts, feelings, regrets, etc., on things, how they used to think sales were, or how they used to see sales as, rather, and sort of what they've been learning in the contrast, maybe some personal anecdotes, anything like that. And since you're still on my screen, Michael, I'm not sure if you've been pinned or something. Hey, do you have any sort of sales stories of your own?
Well, I think much like you, sales is one of those areas that I felt really very weak in a lot of ways, maybe disgusted by, because the way that much of the world kind of views marketing is almost like trickery, and I'm really not into tricking people into doing things, and so that was kind of my inclination about how sales worked, and there are a lot of kind of hacks into people's subconscious mind that the advertisers and marketers know about how to get people to do things that they may not necessarily want to do. But autonomy is much different. Essentially, it's talking about the ethical role in marketing and sales, and really, it's not. I don't even really consider it sales anymore. It's more like problem solving and developing relationships. And I think those are two really important things that I think Richard really is a key example of how to do that with par excellence. He is really good at being able to talk to people in a way that he listens very carefully, and he starts to identify things that people have problems with, and he asks them questions about, how are you dealing with that? What kind of things have you tried? Looked into these particular things, and I think along those lines is kind of also the copywriting thing, this idea of like where people are at when it comes to the marketplace. Are they completely uninformed about what the issue is, or do they have some inclination of what the issue is, or do they have some idea of what the products out there that solve the particular problems that issue might create, or do they actually have a favorite? So like there's different levels of where people are at, and being able to speak to those different people in a way that is comfortable and gentle and patient is something that we really as entrepreneurs we've got to develop those skills, and we've got to play those roles. And I think my view on sales and marketing has changed dramatically being a part of Autonomy.
As has mine, definitely as has mine. I mean, basically, like sales to me used to be the just quintessential just thing I hated. Like I personally don't want to sell anything as it is, just period. If there's anything, at least personally, that would work for me, it's going to be something more along the lines of donations. And donations is a thing that you can apply sales to. And I have actually done it in the past, but it's radically different. At least for me, the thing that makes sales really icky is the fact that you are, instead of just doing things for the person, you're like, I'll do this for you for a price. And it just felt like this weird ransomy, like very, like it was inherently dishonest. But again, that's not really sales. That's a lot more like issues I would say I have more with just business in general, because I very much enjoy, I very much like pushing things that are free and open source. And I would love to get society itself to a point where, everything is free and open source, and it's like a whole culture around like you build stuff for yourself so that improves your life, and then you just throw it out there and share it, and then everything just builds up from there. But of course, getting culture from here to there is a monumental task, and it's unknown if that can even be done. Nonetheless, it's definitely a thing I'd at least want to try.
I think what you're talking about is providing value, and that's kind of part of what Richard is suggesting in this course is really kind of creating the circumstance that you're providing people with value that they can recognize, and then that continues to build the relationship and build the level of trust to the point that they respect the advice or suggestions that you have to solve their problems.
Pretty much. Pretty much. Value exchange is the name of the game. I suppose that's just my own issue that I'll have to work on. But in any case, I would not mind at all opening the floor to other people who haven't spoken yet. If there is anyone who has, for example, maybe a sales anecdote, someone trying to sell something to them that they maybe didn't appreciate so much, or maybe they did, maybe someone did a really good job. Maybe you have a success, maybe someone has a success of selling something to someone else, or a failure. Any of these things to share, anything that they can share and reflect on, for what they're learning now in autonomy.
I've got an anecdote from just earlier today, actually. So me and my wife went out for lunch, and it was a restaurant we've been wanting to try, but every time we'd gone there, it was packed out. We weren't able to get a seat. We finally called them at a quiet time, and we went in and sat down. And I presume the owner of the restaurant, it was an Italian restaurant. He had a thick Italian accent, and he was very waving his hands around and very enthusiastic, and greeted us. And so we ordered our food. He took our order, and then he said, "Anything to drink?" And I said, "Yeah, I'll have I think I asked for a cappuccino." And he just pulled a face. He just kind of wrinkled his face. And I looked at him, and he went on to explain that he felt that if I were to have a hot drink and coffee and a bit to drink prior to eating the food, it would mess up my palate, and it wouldn't mix well with the meals that we'd ordered because of the flavors involved in the food that we'd ordered. And he would prefer it if I ordered a glass of water so that I would enjoy the food better. And it was a great example of him just caring about my experience, caring about us enjoying the meal. And it was, he lost out on some extra money there, because we just got water in the end. We didn't buy any drinks to go with our meal. We just got tap water. And I thought that was a great example of honesty and integrity and caring about the customer. It's about you. And if you're going to buy something that I think you don't need, I'm going to tell you, no, I don't think you should buy this thing. It's not going to work for you, and so that was an example I wanted to bring up. The thing that we're learning here is really about caring about what the person is going to get and how, and making sure it's of the highest quality and really is going to be the best experience for them, and not trying to oversell or upsell and all these kind of things that I also had associated with the job of being a salesman or saleswoman or being a seller, because I had the same what would you call it, the same sort of judgment about what that job involved. I could never do that. I could never want to do that. And now, after going through the autonomy course and trying the role plays and talking to other people and digesting the material, what I've come to learn is that many of our daily conversations are sales conversations. We want to sell maybe an idea or a course of action, or we want to sell our opinion, or we want to sell. And even though it's not necessarily money exchanging and we're not doing it for a job, if you are just recommending something to a friend, like, hey, you got to check out this band, for example, you're trying to sell them on that band because you want them to have the experience of enjoying that music, or maybe it's a TV show or XYZ thing. So sales is kind of, it's not what we see in the films in many cases. It's not what we think of. It's actually a very core part of just interacting with each other on the daily, and to bring that wider understanding of what sales is and apply it to our just daily interactions with people we work with, or people we love or live with or care about. That was a huge paradigm shift for me. And another small example, short example that I'll give you as well from today. I went for a suit fitting, and I hate anyone fussing over me. I don't like being waited on in restaurants. I don't like getting my hair cut and having people faff around with me. I don't know, it makes me cringe a little bit and uncomfortable. But I walked into this shop and I'm standing around sort of feeling a bit awkward, thinking I've got this appointment and I'm going to have someone measuring me and trying to get me to buy one of their suits. And the young gentleman who was working there, he came over, he said, "You all right?" And I was like, "Yeah, I've got this appointment. We're a little bit early, but I'm here to try on wedding suits." And he just sort of looked at me and he was like, look, I'll be honest, I'm really new, but just give me a minute. I don't really know what I'm doing. I've got to do a bit of tidying up and I'll be right over. And the way he said that as his opening line, I just immediately felt, oh, I can trust this guy, because he just told me he's new and he doesn't know what he's doing. And he's not trying to have all the answers, and he's not coming with this sort of, I know what you want, or I'm going to sell you something, this presumptive kind of attitude. He just opened up. He said, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how long you've been working there, but he was very, but that honesty up front made me really just feel good about the whole experience. I relaxed, and I found a suit that I liked, and I bought it. And he made a sale, and I hope, he gets the commission or whatever he gets from that. But so two little anecdotes just from today, which two examples of very good salesmen doing what is probably thought of as counterintuitive to many people who work in sales or think about working in sales or get the way people usually get approached by salespeople. It's not the way to do it. The examples we get given in mass media are often very incorrect and poor role models to follow. But yeah, two examples: honesty, show some vulnerability, care very deeply about the person you're selling to.
That is certainly the truth, and you brought up a really good point, especially with goes beyond just selling like items for money. It's like selling opinions, selling ideas, selling just really anything. And going back to your story of the Italian guy, or maybe not Italian guy. I don't know if the guy himself was Italian, but at the very least, the place we're eating was Italian. That sure, he may have lost money on the transaction, but he certainly gained loyalty. Certainly, that's what it sounds like. And loyalty is a lot more important, because even if you want to measure it just through money, or even more broadly through resources, loyalty kind of helps guarantee future resources coming in. And making sure you can do that and have like that stable supply is kind of a lot more important than, getting in, selling someone something they don't need, don't need, let's put it that way. They may want it, but they may not necessarily need it, may not do the thing that they actually need, which could then cost them. And sure, you might get a big sort of short-term gain, but the cost of that is rather large, or can be rather large. And so with that, I want to open the floor to someone else. Let's see if there's someone else in here who maybe has a story either of their own, maybe even an anecdote from family, anything like that, of something like that happening, where someone sold them something that they didn't actually need, and maybe they felt pressured, and there was a bit of a cost to that, and they either learned through observation or learned vicariously not to do that, or maybe they've learned a lesson from doing that of buyer beware. Does anyone have something like that?
I got something real quick.
Awesome.
So, with me, the first product that I've been sold by a friend was the Concordat water machine, and I just went off of my trust with this person. I said, I don't need to do any research. Like, she seems to know what she's talking about. Like, this Concordat water machine must be the truth. It's like the best water machine. So I tried it. Like, the person who was filling up my gallon bottles of water would just give it to me for free. I thought that was pretty genuine. And when I tasted the water, it had this funny like taste of fish at first. I know it sounds weird, but it's something like no other water had ever. I never tasted any water like that. So I thought, oh man, this water must be something, like must be special. And you kind of add the placebo effect in there, and you start to believe like, oh yeah, this does work. And then synchronistically, a couple months ago, one of my really good friends, he was selling me a pan because he works for a company named Royal Prestige. And well, he just sells their products apparently. He doesn't need to purchase the product before selling it, like in the conjure water business, more like the MLMs, which is the multi-level marketing. So synchronistically, I was learning about health, just watching a Mark Passio's podcast on health. And I just really wanted to get my health better. So when he offered me the best pan out there, I was like, let's do it. But it comes to like, pretty much the pan was like $500. And then just to get it shipped was $150. And then when I went to pick it up, it had a fee, an overseas fee or an international fee for about $50. So I'm like, dang, this is like expensive. And sure, look it up on the internet, and it's like, you know, could be a scam. It's an MLM, and just I certainly feel like I am prepared now to, whenever someone tries to sell me something, to do my research first before just, you know, going off of feelings. So I really liked Richard's lecture yesterday because it doesn't seem like he's selling anything. He's just offering, he's just offering his services to the market, not trying to sell you something which you don't need. So yeah, thanks, Ryan.
No problem. I mean, it was your story and you're the one who learned quite a lot about it. And now through sharing it here with everyone can learn quite a bit about it. Namely that doing your own research is quite valuable and can help you find products that you do actually need or will actually do things that you want them to do. Coincidentally, or perhaps not so, do your own research, as I recall, was the name of the last Grand Theft World podcast. I might be wrong about that. I might have done one after that. That was different, but I don't know. Did anyone else see it? Do they remember if that was the name? I don't really have the ability to go check right now. And if not, that's fine because it doesn't matter. But here's another question for people to keep this train rolling: is does anyone have an example where they were offered a product and they then did go and do their own research and they found something maybe a little bit more obscure, or at least something they didn't know about before through doing that was in fact better than the product they're being offered? Or perhaps vice versa. Perhaps they went and did research and found that the product they were being offered was in fact the better thing, just like whoever was trying to sell it to them was saying, or maybe it was just an ad or whatever. Does anyone have a research-based or research-inspired story for us? Anecdote?
Hey.
Oh, yeah, looks like someone does. Good.
Yeah. I might think about sort of what I'm calling my work computer. It's just basically, I was using sort of a gaming computer before for like everything, and it's just like I kind of realized that after my previous gaming computer broke that I don't really need it. And you know, building a good gaming rig, it's pretty expensive. It can run $1,000+. So what I ended up doing, since I'm really going to be using it for like working on my hobbies, like building my website, listening to music, you know, these kind of Zoom calls and such, that I don't really need a big gaming computer for that. I just need something that can display it on my monitors. I can use my browser. I can use Spotify. I can use Zoom and Discord and that kind of stuff. So what I ended up doing was, rather than buying another gaming computer or fixing up my one that's existing, which I still got to take care of, like my spare parts, but I ended up going with a refurbished, I guess more of a utilitarian type of thing. And rather than spending like $1,000+ on a rig, I spent about 500 on this refurbished computer, and it runs like a charm. It really meets my needs. So good savings there. Another example might be like I've sold a couple of cars. In both cases, you know, I'm getting a new car. I'm going to the dealership and getting whatever they offer me. Like maybe it was 100 or 500 for my old clunker that my parents had given me, right? And then I go to, I think, CarX or CarMax. I always forget which one, but there's a car and there's an X in it. And they'll offer me like a much better deal, like 1,000, 2,000 for my trade-in rather than 100, 500, whatever it was. And so, you know, I'm just like doing a little bit of extra research and putting some more savings in my pocket. So that was a great use of just a few hours.
That sounds definitely worth it, because yeah, computer hardware in particular, like in terms of what you're using it for, in terms of who's making it and all that stuff, and how all that changes, just I wouldn't even say year by year at this point. It's almost every like few months. You know, definitely like it's one of the things that I think research pays off on more than most anything else, because it changes so often. It doesn't seem to sometimes, but yeah, like the difference between, for example, Intel stuff and AMD stuff, you know, price-wise, performance-wise, you know, performance versus cost. I mean, you know, it can be pretty huge. I remember the days for AMD and Intel. Granted, this isn't that long ago, and it may still, in fact, be the case where, you know, Intel would charge. I mean, again, with inflation, let's just, you know, I'll use the raw numbers, but inflation, of course, will have changed this. It would have been like $1,600 or more for a processor. That AMD's equivalent would have been $400 to $600, and it would be not as good as the Intel one, but it'd only be like, you know, in every benchmark test you could run, it was like only 4% worse. And so the you know, cost inflation for Intel was just insane. And but people would pay for it because they wanted to make sure they had the one that was the best, even if the extra cost was just exorbitant for the little bit of performance they were getting out of it. So yeah, like in terms of computer hardware, it's like definitely do your own research on that. And you know what? I don't know if this is going to be the best choice, but you know what? This is do it live. So I'm going to do it live and just make bad decisions and see what happens. Because we're going to wrap all this up with a little bit of a narrative. I mean, we had, you know, we had Therese end us off with with talking about a gaming computer. We had Michael talking about Justin and his podcast that has a bit of a sci-fi theme. We had, you know, the do your own research theme going throughout here, so I wanted to show a clip from a little thing called Text Talks BattleTech, because I thought this one section of this two-hour documentary on the fictional history of a fictional universe done by a guy who very well could do actual history documentaries, but instead he does this in his free time just for fun, was perfect in some ways for a discussion on sales, a discussion on, you know, giving people what they need versus what they want, and all these sorts of things. And I just like promoting his stuff because he does really good work. And the other reason I'm going to show this clip is because people have a tendency to learn very well through narrative and metaphor. If you want an example of this outside of stuff like this that is actually meant for business, there's a book called Our Iceberg is Melting, which tells the story of how restructuring an organization and avoiding conflict or averting crisis, I should say, works through a fictional story of penguins and their iceberg. But people have a tendency to be able to tell, like to notice things when they're observing it in other people that they wouldn't see if it's happening to them. And so for that reason, I'm going to see if I can actually do this properly and show this clip. It's about 12 minutes, maybe 12 and a half. And if I can get to the share screen thing. All right, got share sound on. And hopefully you will learn something through this completely fictional thing. Okay. You don't need to know anything about the universe. It should all work out just fine. Oh, also, yeah, they raise stuff for charity, which is pretty cool. Let's turn this on, and there we go. Let's go.
The 2570s are interesting to note, as the relatively new Star League was trying to bully the periphery into joining up, coercing them into becoming Star League territories. Politically, that meant the periphery states could look forward to new and exciting forms of unwarranted solicitation, taxation without any sort of meaningful representation, and repression from a distant and uncaring government. It also meant the wonderful opportunity of joining teams with a government they fundamentally didn't understand, care for, or even notionally support. Understandably, most periphery nations said no thank you. Or, in the case of Van Zandt, what in the cinnamon toast fuck is a Star League? As it turns out, people who had gone that far out into space did so for a reason. Mostly, they were dissatisfied with things in the inner sphere, or at least the core worlds of humanity. Generation after generation, they had boarded their ships, kicked their heels free of Terra, and embarked to a new life, far from any comforts or notion of so-called civilization. These people were, by then, no longer Terrans, and did not think fondly of where they were from. They did not look back and measure their success against the core worlds of humanity. They made their own path and were set to defend it. They didn't want anything to do with the Terran government, its successors, or the states they birthed, and they had gone far out of everyone's way to do just that. And like most folks who were keen on keeping on what they'd made for themselves, the Taurians had founded a competent military for the purposes of keeping assholes off their lawn. This military trained and drilled hard, realizing that sovereignty on the ass end of space was only guaranteed by their will, hard work, sacrifice, and if necessary, their own blood. When they realized the Star League wasn't going to politely back down, they prepared accordingly. They didn't beg. They didn't really negotiate. They dug in, put their helmets on, and waited. When the Star League said this was for the benefit of all, the Taurians replied with the diplomatic version of, "No thank you." And when they saw forces marshaling on their frontier, they opened their playbook and went to work. Case Amber, as it was called, was the first time the SLDF really had to fight a nation that wasn't nominally or supposed to be under its control. Worse, this was a conflict against a periphery state that was plainly tired of their shit and prepared to do something about it. The SLDF assumed their navy and their military was of higher quality, and should that fail, the substantial numbers advantage would make the war a decided outcome. And so, I need to illustrate a difference in naval doctrine. The SLDF Navy was based on the Hegemony Navy, which at the time favored advanced technologies, complicated designs, and innovative building practices, all in an attempt to keep power parity with the surrounding states. Those states had since become allies, if at least notionally. And as such, the SLDF Navy inheriting these vessels found themselves with a navy that was fantastic on paper, and yet completely untested in the only way these things ever fucking matter: actual war. War that they had not fought in a very long time to the fullest of their ability to do so because of the Ares Conventions. And yes, while the Ares Conventions were now suspended under the Starleague Charter, their impact on the intervening years of conflict was imprinted clearly on their doctrines, shipbuilding, warfighting, and battle theory. Which, I should point out, these were conventions that the Taurians had never signed. These were conventions the Taurians had never observed and didn't trust, mainly because shortly after the Capellans signed the treaty, they gassed the Taurians. And as it turns out, most people tend not to forget shit like that. And the Taurians, well, this is their symbol. And such is their symbol, because we have trained since our founding day to stack bodies like fucking cordwood, so if you insist in fucking around, you will most certainly find out, doesn't fit on the money, and probably sends the wrong message to international investors. The Taurian Navy was designed by people who were making do with less, hell-bent on keeping scary strangers out of their backyard. It was a frigate navy mostly, favoring speed and firepower to get the job done, or run and alert everyone else if it couldn't. The SLDF Navy at that time was the Grand Fleet designed to look good and provide a strategic feel-good measure to theater-scale conflict. It was built on the principle that it would never be needed, and therefore only needed to match the latest idealized version of what a fleet was, with every new generation of leadership and appropriations. The Taurian Navy was no such thing. It didn't live in military academies or in advertisements about next-gen anything. It had one objective: to defend the Taurian nation, and was principally designed to fight the SLDF and anyone else who got ideas on free real estate. To illustrate this, let's look at how the Taurians built their standard warship of the conflict. This is the Concordat. It's a big frigate. It can sustain twice the acceleration of the Baron. It carries 500 tons of armor that is not fancy and simply very hard. It is designed for easy damage control, easy field refits even in lower technology-based facilities, and can operate independently of other vessels for extended periods of time. It boasts overlapping fields of fire, ranging from mech-scale lasers and LRMs to a full complement of naval-scale lasers and autocannons. In many ways, it actually outguns the Baron. Functionally, the Concordat Frigate is an anti-everything cocaine-fueled death machine designed to speed into action wherever the Taurians need it most, and to be multi-mission capable as an orbital bombardment platform, troop transport, strategic weapons platform, and to be honest, there was nothing better than the Concordat-class frigate for skirmishing with pirates. And in this sad case, these pirates looked an awful lot like the SLDF and their new friends. So the Taurians made a multi-mission capable heavy frigate that's faster, better, more reliable, robust, and deadly than its larger state opponent. Naturally, this solution has to cost a fortune, what with the Taurians having a fraction of their industrial base. Actually, it didn't. First reason being is it wasn't sophisticated at all. It was just good engineering and off-the-shelf components. That, and I heavily suspect the Taurians punish incompetent people making decisions at a strategic procurement level with actual prison sentences instead of allowing them to meddle in affairs. And so, by building what they needed instead of what they desired, by listening to people who fight actual fucking wars instead of listening to self-actualization concepts floated by war planners who don't fight and never will, by correctly identifying what they required to defend the realm instead of opting for the biggest, the best, and the most expensive solution, the Taurian Navy beat the SLDF to deployment of its peer vessel by 2 decades. 2 full decades of use, training, education, tactic development, and establishing an actual operational readiness rate before the Baron left the slip yard. Also, the Concordat's engines worked the first time they did a shakedown cruise, because instead of trying to rewrite the book, they took what worked and accepted it as good enough. Amazing concept, right? Taurian naval doctrine centered around these now very proven ships. They weren't just another line item in the budget. The Taurian Navy made a recommendation for shipbuilding, the shipbuilders built it, and then they used them. It was a ship designed for a purpose, and put into that purpose as reasonably as any periphery nation could. And so the tiny Taurian navy stood off against the fleets of the SLDF and House Davion allies in what would be one of the greatest defense-in-depth campaigns in history. The small Taurian navy managed to lure the SLDF and the Davions into an absolute shooting gallery. At Tintavia, the Taurian navy destroyed 12 warships, including 5 barons, which were too slow to run, too sluggish to close, and too weak to fight back against the heavy frigates of the Taurian navy. This tiny navy kept the Davions and the SLDF on the back foot through 10 waves of invasion. Not 10 battles, 10 waves. That is to say, landing troops and then getting stalled and then sending for help and hoping the Taurians don't show up to murder them as well. Even as the ground war slowly turned against them, the Taurian military time and again kept the bulk of the SLDF, itself drawing reinforcements, to barely hold onto their conquests, and it kept them on shaky footing for the duration of the entire war. The Taurian navy made things dicey through asymmetrical warfare, hit-and-run naval raids, and clandestine resupply of blockaded worlds through an excellent fleet and good naval warfare doctrine. This allowed the state to fight the Star League for so long it became an embarrassment, and potentially another crisis of government. Conquering the Taurian Concordat took the SLDF from 2576 to 2596. 20 years. 20 fucking years of fighting the Taurians on both land and sea and across the vast Gulf of Stars. 20 years because they had to chase a navy around with absolutely inferior ships they had no choice to use because they were bought and paid for by war planners now likely dead, retired, or too busy counting oceans of money to fucking care. 20 years with the fear that every time the SLDF moved an inch, the Taurian navy would show up, drop off troops, and lay out another 1,000 megatons or so of go the fuck home. So why bring up the Baron, military affairs, military procurement, strategic planning, the reunification war, and the divide between an idealized military and the one you operate on a daily basis in a discussion on the Warhammer? Well, for one, I think this is clearly established by now. The customer has no idea what the fuck they want, and the builder is fine with that, so long as the bills are paid on time. Things like the mullet, jorts, shoulder-fired contact-fused nuclear weapons, tetraethyl lead, chlorine trifluoride, spray-on hair, Agent Orange, DDT, and certain automotive products do not exist by accident. People, meaning the customer, absolutely ask for these things, and typically they know not what they ask for, nor care what happens afterward. And in this case, when the customer is a government official, and a government procurement official at that, and the amount of money is essentially infinity, bad decisions and their impact can be measured in lives, borders, and flags. Wrong choices in these cases can be the end of a nation, and quite messily so.
Now, you were probably wondering halfway through that, hey, what does this have to do with sales? Where is this going? But hey, perhaps wrapped it all up there at the end for you. So with that, does anyone have any further thoughts or perhaps any comments on the video? Assuming I can even be heard, actually.
We can hear you.
Okay,
I
good.
thought it was rather interesting because even though it was kind of a fictional account, I think we got a similar thing with the Ukraine war going on right now, where there's a lot of there's a lot of confusion about what's actually going on in Ukraine and what is actually happening. And to a large degree, people are being led to the idea that Ukraine is. The Ukrainians are defending their country from this bad guy, and the reality may be that they're just annihilating themselves in this just meat grinder of a war that really is not going to help anybody. but the fact that they've got you know, people outside of their you know, concern, handing them things to just keep this thing rolling. You know, and the end result is you know, the absolute worst situation for the people that are actually in the middle of it.
Interesting. I actually didn't expect that as a as sort of a thing that people would or that anyone would associate with. I thought if they were going to associate with anything actually warlike, would have been something like Afghanistan. Given the whole, you know, fictionally took 20 years and then nothing happened, pretty much nothing happened, and, you know, et cetera, et cetera. And things like how, you know, you have the one that focused on, one side focused all on like the fanciest, best stuff, but the best stuff, you know, that money could buy didn't really do the job of the thing that was just like, okay, we'll just throw stuff together that we know works. And that's at least what I really noticed. So that's why I pulled that clip or used that clip, because it was like, yeah, it's that difference between good enough plus a little bit extra, you know, and trying to go for the biggest, best, most expensive thing, which may not work at all for you, for your purposes, and going with what, you know, helping give the customer what they need rather than what they want. And, you know, that's why I thought in a metaphorical way, that clip just worked.
Yeah, and I think there was like some reference to expertise and people that actually do what is necessary on a regular basis, feeding with that kind of information. I think that's also something that's really important when you're looking for, you know, a resolution to something, a problem or so forth. Look for people that are actually in that field, that are doing that kind of thing every single day. Those are going to be the people that know, that have the best information, that can really be the most effective at getting, you know, what you need done.
Pretty much. And you know, sales occurs in all walks of life and for all sorts of reasons. But in the metaphors from one can certainly apply to any other, because it's the same thing, regardless of whether it's you know, a situation like that, fictional or potentially not sometime in the future, or, you know, selling someone a water cooler. It doesn't really matter. There's always going to be that difference between, you know, who are the people who actually know what they're doing, what does the person want versus what is their actual situation, what do they need, and all those sorts of things. And I think that's what makes it really valuable. And that's why I think fictional accounts and narrative, I mean, we all know that narrative is super important these days. I think that's something we could all tap into more. I would like to try doing that more than I have in the past. And with that, unless anyone has some closing thoughts, anything they want to throw in just for the end, just for, you know, any other anecdotes of their own, just anything, I'll let you do that. Otherwise, we'll just end it here.
Well, I'll just say, you know, I think it was well done. The fact that you put your neck out there a little and risked a little to put something out that may have sounded a little strange at first, but I think that's the way you learn, Brian, and I applaud you for taking the risk.
Thank you very much. Risks are certainly a thing I've taken enough of. So, you know, maybe I'm almost too used to it, at least in some regards. But thank you very much. Is there anyone else? Anything anyone wants to throw in?
Yeah, first I want to say that was a great video, Ryan. That was me kind of just sucked into the whole Navy stuff, kind of just analyzing the weapons and whatnot. But it all came together at the end. And I took a screenshot of the video because I might look into that. But I wanted to talk because I remember when I was in Bahrain as well, I purchased this silver chain, and apparently it was like $80 around there. But just me, like, not knowing anything, thinking like, oh, just because I'm in another country and I purchased something, like I can sell it in the United States for a higher cost or a higher price. I go to a pawn shop, this is $5. So totally don't take other people's word of mouth for things. And Very good, Ryan.
Awesome. That's actually a really, really unique story there because I hadn't even thought of that one. For like doing the resell, and the resell may not necessarily the value that someone says may not be the actual value. Yeah, I didn't think of that at all. But in any case, if there's one more person, sure, let you say something. Otherwise, we're going to end it. Sounds like we're going to end it, and that's perfectly okay with me. So let me get up the screen share one last time to get to the, wait, I just got to go down here to get that thing in there. Thank you everyone for joining in for my very bumbling ad-libbed ride where I kind of shoehorned in a few things and did my best with what I had. And with that, we're going to end this edition of Do It Live. Or we won't. Why is this not playing?
Ready, set, go.
Alrighty, let's just stop recording and all that, and then there we go.
Yeah.
That should be good.
Stephanie, you
Well
came
done,
right at the end. You just came
You
at the end.
missed it, darn it. I was hoping it was going to be like one of those long running ones that goes an hour and a half, 2 hours.